This video was made possible thanks to the support of our amazing patrons. We couldn't do this without you.
Don't forget that you can support the channel for free and receive 10% off orders over $10 of Flipside Gaming by using the promo code Affinity at the checkout. Or if TCG Player or Magic Madhouse are more your thing, then be sure to place your order through our affiliate links in the description. Once again, at no extra cost to yourselves.
Hello everybody and welcome to another EDH gameplay video brought to you by Affinity for Commander. My name is Martin.
And my name is Alex.
Today we are once again joined by Angelo, a writer from EDHREC.com, as well as Chris, better known as the Commander Mechanic. As always, links to both our guest social media accounts will be in the video description, so you should definitely check them out after the game. But without further ado, let's take a look at those opening hands. I am playing my Edgar Markov Vampire Tribal deck and keep an opening hand of Stormkirk Captain, Vindicate, Commander Sphere, Bloodseeker, Nomad Outpost, Terramorphic Expanse and a Plains.
I'm playing my Muldrotha the Gravetide Reanimator deck and keep a starting hand containing Elves of Deep Shadow, Wood Elves, Journey to Eternity, Solemn Simulacrum, Polluted Delta, Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth and a Forest.
Chris is playing his Grismold the Dreadsower token / +1/+1 counters deck and keeps a hand containing Deathrite Shaman, Hardened Scales, Lightning Greaves, Massacre Worm, Prismatic Vista, Forbidden Orchard and Shizo Death's Storehouse.
And finally, Angelo is playing his Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker copy deck and keeps a hand of Cathartic Reunion, Combat Celebrant, Chandra Tortured Defiance, Ingot Chewer, Duplicant, Myriad Landscape and a Mountain.
I win the die roll and start things off by playing Nomad Outpost. I then pass to Alex.
I play a Forest and cast Elves of Deep Shadow. Out of mana, I pass the turn.
Chris plays Shizo Death's Storehouse and casts Deathrite Shaman. With nothing more to do, he ends his turn.
Angelo plays Myriad Landscape and passes to Martin.
I play Bloodfell Caves, gaining a life, and pass the turn.
I play Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and tap my Elves of Deep Shadow to make a black mana. I lose a life from this and then cast Wood Elves, using its ETB to search my library for Breeding Pool, and put it into play tapped. Unable to do anything else, I end my turn.
Chris plays Prismatic Vista, pays 1 life and sacrifices it to put a forest onto the battlefield. Next he casts Lightning Greaves and uses his Shaman's ability to exile a land in his graveyard. He adds a green mana to his mana pool, which he then uses to cast Hardened Scales and passes to Angelo.
Angelo plays a Mountain and casts Cathartic Reunion. He discards 2 cards, draws 3 and passes the turn.
I play a Swamp and cast Stormkirk Captain. My commander's ability triggers, creating a 1/1 vampire token, and I end my turn.
I play Polluted Delta and cast Demir's Signet. Next I lose a life to Elves of Deep Shadow to add mana to my mana pool and cast Solemn Simulacrum. I search my library for an island, put it into play tapped and move to combat. Here I attack Chris with my Wood Elves, dealing him 1 damage, and then pass the turn.
Chris plays Forbidden Orchard and then casts his commander, Grismold the Dreadsower. He chooses Angelo to receive a 1/1 spirit from his Orchard's ability, equips his boots to the Mouldy Troll, and moves to his end step. Grismold's ability triggers, creating everybody a 1/1 plant token, and Chris passes the turn.
Angelo plays Seagate Wreckage and ends his turn.
I play Terramorphic Expanse and then move to combat. Here I attack Alex with my 2/2 first striking vampire, and he blocks with his sad robot. The Gloomy Automaton is destroyed, allowing Alex to draw a card, and I move to my second main phase. Here I cast Commander's Sphere and sacrifice my Expanse to put a Swamp into play tapped. With nothing more to do, I pass to Alex.
I begin my turn by casting Viscera Seer, followed by Journey to Eternity, targeting my Wood Elves. Next I sacrifice the Enchanted Elves to my Seer, scrying 1, returning Wood Elves to the battlefield, and transforming my aura into Atzal, Cave of Eternity. I search my library for a forest with the elves ETB, putting it into play tapped, and then cast Priest of the Forgotten Gods. Pleased with how productive I have been, I pass the turn.
Chris uses his Deathrite Shaman to exile the land in my graveyard and casts MacLeod. He gifts Angelo with another spirit from his orchard and sacrifices his plant to the fungus's Devour ability. MacLeod gets 3+1/+1 counters, Grismold gets 2+1/+1 counters, and everybody acknowledges the insane value that Hardened Scales is going to give Chris if it isn't dealt with. Moving to combat, Chris attacks Angelo with his commander. Angelo chooses not to block, taking 5 damage, and Chris moves to his end step. Grismold triggers, giving everybody a plant, and Chris ends his turn. Angelo responds to this by sacrificing his Myriad Landscape, searching his library for 2 mountains and putting them onto the battlefield. He then moves to his turn.
Angelo plays High Market and casts Chandra, Torch of Defiance. He uses her +1 ability to add 2 red mana to his mana pool, which he uses to cast Thornbite Staff, and then passes to Martin.
I play a Plains and cast Mortify, destroying Hardened Scales before it gets out of hand. Not finished blowing stuff up, I cast Vindicate, this time destroying MacLeod, and pass the turn.
I start my turn by sacrificing for Saracia and Wood Elves to activate my Priest's ability. I choose Chris as the sole target for her ability, forcing him to lose 2 life and sacrifice his plant. Grismold gains another +1/+1 counter, I gain 2 life, and add 2 black mana to my mana pool. I then use this mana to help cast my commander, Muldrotha the Gravetide. Next, I cast a Solemn Simulacrum in my graveyard with Muldrotha's ability, having it count as an artifact rather than a creature. I use ETB to put an island into play from my library, take 1 damage to produce a black mana with my Elves of Deep Shadow, and use to cast the Saracia in my graveyard. Happy with my board state, I end my turn.
Chris plays a Swamp and exiles the Myriad Landscape in Angelo's graveyard with his Shaman. Next he taps Forbidden Orchard, giving me a spirit with the land's ability, and casts Massacre Worm. Not liking the sound of this, Alex sacrifices everything other than his commander to Viseria's ability, scrying once 6 times. Grismold gets 2 +1/+1 counters from the tokens that Alex sacrificed, and Massacre Worm then resolves. Angelo and I scoop up all of our creatures, and Grismold gets another 6 +1/+1 counters from the destroyed tokens. Angelo then loses 6 life to the Worm's ability, and I lose 8. Chris then moves his Greaves over to the Worm and moves to combat. He attacks me with both of his creatures, dealing me a whopping 20 damage, and then moves to his post-combat main phase. Here he re-equips his Greaves to Grismold and moves to his end step. Everybody creates a plant token, and Chris passes to Angelo.
Angelo activates Chandra's +1 ability, adding 2 red mana to his mana pool, and uses it to cast Humble Defector. Next he casts his commander, Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker, and attaches Thornbite Staff to the goblin for free, given that he is a shaman. Angelo then taps Kiki-Jiki, creating a copy of Humble Defector, and taps the token to draw 2 cards. He gives control over the defected token to Chris, and then moves to his end step, where Chris is forced to sacrifice the token due to the text on Kiki-Jiki, putting a +1/+1 counter on Grismold. Thornbite Staff sees the token die, untapping the mirror-breaking goblin, and Angelo passes the turn.
I play a Swamp and cast Bloodline Keeper. Edgar's ability triggers, creating me a 1/1 vampire token, and I then end my turn.
I once again cast a Solemn Simulacrum in my graveyard, putting a Swamp into play with his ETB. Next I cast Reclamation Sage, destroying Chris's Lightning Greaves with her ability, and recast Viseria's from my graveyard. Not wanting to leave myself open to a big, tramply creature, I opt not to attack, and pass to Chris.
Chris begins his turn by casting Whisper Silk Cloak, giving me a spirit with his Orchard's ability. He then equips the cloak to his commander and casts Massacre for free, given that I control a plains and he controls a swamp. I respond to this by casting Go for the Throat, destroying the Massacre Worm before it makes me lose any more life, and Alex responds to this by sacrificing everything except for Muldrotha to Viseria's. He draws a card from his Simulacrum, scries 1 4 times, and everybody's creatures get -2/-2. Grismold gains 6 +1/+1 counters from the tokens that died, and Chris moves to combat. He attacks Alex with his unblockable commander, dealing him 19 damage, which would have been 21 if Masker hadn't given him -2/-2. Such a shame. Chris then moves to his end step where everybody creates a plant and ends his turn.
Angelo starts his turn by invoking out Ingot Chewer, destroying Chris's Whisper Silk Cloak with its ETB. The elemental is then sacrificed, and Angelo uses Chandra's +1 ability to add 2 red mana to his mana pool. Next he casts Zealous Conscripts, taking control of Grismold, and then moves to combat. Before attackers are declared, Angelo taps High Market, sacrificing his plant to gain a life. This puts a +1/+1 counter on Grismold, giving him 22 power, and Angelo swings the troll at his former master. Chris blocks with his plant, but sadly for him still takes 21 commander damage, given that Grismold has trample. This knocks Chris out of the game, removing Grismold from the battlefield, and everybody laughs about what an amazing play that was. With nothing more to do, Angelo passes to Martin.
In my turn, I finally cast my commander, Edgar Markov. Next I activate Bloodline Keeper's ability, creating a 2/2 vampire with flying, and move to combat. Here I attack Angelo with my commander, triggering his ability and putting a +1/+1 counter on each of my vampires. Angelo declares no blocks, taking 6 damage, and I pass the turn.
I cast Noxious Gearhulk, destroying Angelo's conscripts with his ETB and gaining 3 life. Next I cast the Reclamation Sage in my graveyard, destroying Angelo's Thornbite Staff with her ability, and move to combat. Here I attack Chandra with Muldrotha and my plant, lowering her loyalty to 0 and completely wiping Angelo's board of non-land permanents. Not bad for a turn's work, really. Happy that I've disrupted any infinite combos that Angelo might have been planning, I end my turn.
Angelo casts Hedron Archive, followed by Dockside Extortionist. He creates 3 treasure tokens thanks to the artifacts Alex and I control, and passes to me.
Martin casts Darksteel Ingot and creates another vampire with his Keeper's ability. He then moves to combat, once again attacking Angelo with Edgar, and puts a +1/+1 counter on each of his vampires. Angelo declares no blocks, taking 7 damage, and Martin passes the turn.
Alex casts the Viserys Seer in his graveyard for what feels like the billionth time, and I respond by casting Crackling Doom. Angelo and Alex both take 2 damage, Angelo sacrifices his Extortionist, and Alex sacrifices his commander. Viserys Seer then resolves, and Alex curses me for ruining his plan. Sorry, not sorry. Not to be deterred, Alex casts Craterhoof Behemoth, giving each of his creatures +5/+5 and trample. Next he moves to combat, attacking me with everything except for the summoning sick Viserys Seer. Not wanting to go down without a fight, I cast Terminate, targeting the Craterhoof. Alex sacrifices the beast to Viserys Seer, scrying the top card of his library to the bottom, and I triple block Reclamation Sage. The Sage is destroyed and I take lethal damage, knocking me out of the game. Out of mana, Alex ends his turn.
Angelo plays a mountain and recasts his commander. Next he sacrifices 3 treasures to cast Combat Celebrant, and copies the warrior with Kiki's ability. This allows Angelo to take infinite combat steps by attacking with the Celebrant copy, exerting him, and untapping his commander. He can then create another clone of the Combat Celebrant, repeating the process and attacking me over and over until my life total reaches 0, winning him the game.
Well, that's it for another game. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'd once again like to thank our guests for joining us, and we can't wait to play with them again soon. Don't forget that you can help to support the channel in 4 quick and easy ways: subscribing to the channel, liking this video, hitting that bell icon, and leaving us a comment. I read every one. And if you'd really like to show your support, then be sure to check out our Patreon page, where you can get exclusive rewards and goodies for as little as $1 a month. That's all for now though, we'll see you next time.